But I have the honor this evening of presenting our guest speaker, and whenever I'm interviewed after a court case, I like to say the first thing that we're very fortunate to live in this country, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We air our differences in a very civil manner in an air-conditioned courtroom. We don't have to dodge bullets, we don't have to jump in foxholes, and we don't have to stand in front of tanks. It goes twice for each click. There we go. You might recognize this famous picture. It's called Tank Man. It was a young patriot for freedom in Tiananmen Square not too long after the massive government shooting of students there in 1989. Well, our honored guest this evening has, what I like to say, jumped out of perfectly good airplanes as a paratrooper. He's dodged bullets in Iraq. He's lived in foxholes, and I like to say figuratively, he's also stood in front of tanks. Tanks, the awesome force of politics, is what I call tanks. Number one, the tank of a politicized military. In Iraq, his team captured an al-Qaeda leader that was planning an ambush to kill all of his men. Our speaker's creative way of inducing him to spill the beans, give up all the information about the ambush without touching him, saved his men. But too often our freedom-loving guys are in a situation where no good deed goes unpunished. It earned him a reprimand from the tank of a politicized military. Understand this, some politicians actually are more concerned with the lives of the enemy than they are with our own citizen warriors. The tank of politics. He faced an electorate tank in Florida to become their congressional representative to D.C. He was immediately appointed to the Armed Services Committee, where he returned to Iraq as a congressman, probably to have, I figure, an interesting conversation with those politicized military leaders, right?
A little bit.
He faced the tank of electoral corruption. He lost his re-election in an extremely corrupted voting system. One example, in one of his districts where only seven voters were registered to vote, 900 ballots were cast. The Florida Secretary of State, the Florida Attorney General, sat on their hands and did nothing as the TV results rolled in. And you have to scream, citizens, what is wrong with this picture? They did nothing. And, by the way, at one time he was also, I got the paratroopers up there, okay. At one time he was also on the candidate list to run for President of the United States. I can call anywhere in the country. California? Colonel West? Oh, we love him out here. I call Missouri. Allen West? Oh yes, he's our hero. We would just love to meet him. West Virginia. Excuse me. West Virginia. The guy's name is Jimmy. Jimmy? Do you know Allen West? Pause, quote, I would walk through hell with an open can of gasoline to save my men, unquote. Yep, Jimmy, that's him. So there you have it, folks. With all this life experience behind him, you'll find no better patriot for freedom and for America than Representative Colonel Allen West. There you go.
Quit playing that toy. Thank you so much, and I'm going to take it off of that. How you get it back to the Tiananmen Square one? Click it back to the Tiananmen Square.
Okay.
There we go. There it is. Hey, look, it is a special pleasure and an honor to be here with each and every one of you all tonight. And I just want to share some thoughts and perspectives about the Second Amendment. And then I'd like to hear, some of your questions, maybe if we could do that, Dick and Tyler, if that's okay. And then we'll go on. But, we're here at a place called Heritage Foundation. And part of our heritage is understanding who we are as American people. The great thing about the Second Amendment Institute is that Dick won't tell you, but he's kind of long in the tooth. And the reason why this country has been around for 241 years is because generations pass on this thing about liberty and freedom to subsequent generations. And so when you look at a young man like Tyler and the fact that he is starting up this organization, years from now when they're still talking about the Heller decision, but Dick Heller will be gone. And what we will know about Dick Heller is what I learned from Brigadier General Rick Lynch, who was my assistant division commander in the 4th Infantry Division, who retired as a 3-star general. He was the commanding general of the 3rd Infantry Division during the surge in Iraq. And he told us when all of us battalion commanders, before we were getting ready to head over to Iraq in 2003, he said, man, life is all about how you live your dash. And we didn't really understand what he was talking about because we were focused on going over to Iraq and getting all our equipment and being ready. He said, this is what happens in your life. When you're dead and gone, and there's your tombstone, you have a start date and you have an end date. And in between is a simple little thing called a dash. And everything about your life, everything that will be encompassed in your memories or what you have achieved is in that simple little dash. And that's what we're going to remember when we walk past that final resting spot for Dick Heller, is that he stood up as a patriot and stood for the Second Amendment. But the key thing is that Tyler will be able to walk by that final resting place for a great patriot like Dick Heller and say, thank you for allowing me to stand up and continue the fight that you started. And when I think about that heritage, I think about what today is. Today is the day that the shot that was fired that was heard around the world happened at Lexington Green. And if you have never had the chance to stand there at Lexington Green and just think about the fact that those few men who answered the call of service, when like it says in Isaiah 6 and 8, whom shall we send? Who will go for us? And these proud Americans stood up and said, here am I, send me. And they took that field in front of that which was known as the greatest military force the world had ever seen, the British Army. And even though they were defeated there, they stood. And what they said was there was something about this country. There was something about who we are. There was something about liberty, freedom, and individual sovereignty that it is willing and worth to lay down your life and fight for. But what we must remember on this day, when that shot that was fired that was heard around the world, why the British were coming up there into Massachusetts in the first place, heading up to Concord. Because they were going to find a place where the Americans were making firearms. They were going to disarm Americans. On this day, this is why we have this Second Amendment Institute. Because this country was established because we believe that every American, every man and woman, law-abiding citizen, has the right to keep and to bear arms, and that it shall not be infringed. And if you go back and you read the writings of the Founding Fathers, it's very clear to understand why the Second Amendment is there where it is placed. Because your First Amendment talks about those key individual freedoms and liberties. The first of which being the freedom of religion. The second, freedom of speech, the freedom, the right to assemble, the right to petition your government for redress of grievances. But when you think about the Second Amendment, it's there to protect those First Amendment freedoms and rights that you have. And when I go back and see that picture of Tiananmen Square, and I remember when it happened, USA Today had an article about 2 weeks ago on the front page. And they're talking about this new thing that is happening in the United States of America called gun tourism. And the most people that are coming here to the United States of America for gun tourism are from China. And the funny thing about gun tourism is that they're coming here to enjoy a simple right and freedom that many of us take for granted, that many people are trying to take away from us. Because once upon a time, the Chinese people were armed. If you go back and you study the Chinese resistance against the Japanese during World War II, you read about the rape of Nanking, what happened in Shanghai. They were fighting against the Japanese. But then all of a sudden, after World War II, when the communists decided that they want to take over China, they did not want those people to still be armed. And 7 years after that incident at Tiananmen Square was when the Chinese government decided to ban all weapons in China. You can go to jail in China just for having a toy gun today. I don't want to ever see it get to that point. And that's why the heritage of Dick Heller to Tyler and you all being here is so important. That's why I don't want us to ever forget what today was. The day that we fired that shot that said that we do have that right to defend ourselves, that right to bear arms. But when you think about the Obergefell versus Hodges case, and a lot of people say, well, Scratch say, what was that case? That was the same-sex marriage case. Well, all of a sudden, 5 individuals not too far away from here, the Supreme Court said that we have a right to create a new individual right in the United States of America. And it's the right to be married. And we're going to say that people have the 14th Amendment equal protection under the law right for us to create this right and protect them. And we, these 5, are going to decree all across the land that this will now be the law of the land. But yet, as Dick just talked about, that right that we have enshrined to us, and remember, your inalienable rights do not come from man. They're endowed to you from your Creator. But yet the Second Amendment right is something that you don't have all across the United States of America. And how can that be? And if our voices remain silent, one day we will end up being just as that picture. And then what happens subsequently 7 years after that picture. This is such an incredible fight that we have to stand up and fight for. And when you think about what is going on, when you think about what the head of the Department of Homeland Security said, Jerome Kelly, just a couple of days ago, that we are on a 21st century battlefield. That here in our United States of America, in every single state, you have Islamic jihadists that are planning, being investigated to conduct attacks against us here in America. And the interesting thing about what the professor just said about California, think about the fact how someone was able to go up to 4 different people just recently in California and gun them down. Because in California, you cannot have a concealed carry permit. So in other words, what we are doing is we are allowing the American citizen to now be a victim. The American citizen to now be a target. My last duty assignment in the United States Army was Fort Hood, Texas. That building I know very well. And I know a couple of the survivors. But think about the fact that our men and women in uniform were gunned down on a military installation like sheep by a person standing on a table shouting Allahu Akbar, the exact same thing that the guy in Fresno, California shouted as well. But yet still to today, we have a government that says that's workplace violence. When Tashfeen Malik and Saeed Farouk did what they did at the Christmas celebration down in San Bernardino, California, we have a government that came out and said that it's not about how American citizens should be able to protect themselves, it's about more gun control. When the young man walked into the nightclub in Orlando and gunned down all of those people, it wasn't an outrage about how could this happen? How could someone walk in? How could they engage people and no one was able to stand up and defend themselves? It was about more gun control. But yet we live in a country that 240 some odd years ago, brave patriots took the field to fire a shot that enables us to sit here in this beautiful facility. And I am fearful that it could be 30, it could be 40, it could be 50 years, it could happen. If Mike Bloomberg has his way, it will happen even sooner than that. That they will turn us from a group of citizens to a gathering of subjects. Because as I often say, an armed person is a citizen. An unarmed person is a subject. which is exactly what happened 7 years after that picture was taken in China. You know, just recently I bought a F1 223 carbine pistol made down in Spring, Texas. A sweet, I mean, if you want to see it, I got my picture. It is so nice. I mean, this thing is, yeah, I wish I had that sucker over in Iraq and Afghanistan. But, you know, I decided that I want to have a little vertical front hand grip that was mounted on it because, you know, the barrel gets a little hot. You know, I was popping off those rounds pretty quick. Colonel still got it. I'll show you my shot group. And the folks at Defender Outdoors Rifle Range broke my heart when they say, hey, sir, if you do that, you have to go online to the ATF and you have to fill out this form. And you have to send them in $200. And you have to wait 10 months for them to approve it right now because that's the waiting list for you to get a tax stamp back. Because they will have declared that if you make this cosmetic change to your .223 carbine pistol, it is now all of a sudden a small barrel rifle. Now look, you know, Dick told you, I used to jump out of airplanes. I am not the smartest person in the world. You know, red light, you stay in the airplane, green light means you jump. I'm not an F-35 pilot or anything like that. But I understand physics and I understand ballistics. And who are these people that are making these insidious rules? They say, I, as a law-abiding citizen, cannot make this addition to my rightfully owned .223 carbine pistol, which changed nothing about the ballistics, which changed nothing about the physics. So how all of a sudden does that thing make it something that it is not? And this is why we need a Second Amendment Institute. This is why we need to stand up and fight. Because there are people that are making these laws, there are people that are making these rules, there are people that are making these regulations, which slowly, as they say in China, the death by 1,000 cuts, or the drip, drip, drip of the water torture. And the next thing you know, you have lost that Second Amendment right. You look at what is happening with some of our gun ranges, outdoor gun ranges. Recently, not too far away from here, there was a circuit court judge in West Virginia that brought an injunction against a rifle range saying that it was a noise complaint that was brought against them. Well, how do you bring a noise complaint against a place that is zoned in an area that they cannot have a noise complaint against them? But the interesting thing was that this judge ordered this outdoor gun range to provide all the records of everyone that has ever shot there, to include law enforcement. Now, what does that have to do with a noise complaint from someone? This is what is happening in these great United States of America. But yeah, if you were to come up and say, well, this is a great reason why we can have silencers on some of these, you know, long rifles so you don't have so much noise. They're going, oh, no, 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 no. That's banned. That's not something that you can have. But, you know, it would, you know, reduce any, you know, concern about hearing impairment or what have you. No, 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 you can't do that. See, it is not about that which is commonsensical. It is about continuing cut by cut by cut to infringe upon that right. What difference does it make with a 20 or a 30 round magazine? But it's about the cut by cut by cut. And if we don't have the Dick Hellers in the future, then you don't have people that will stand up and fight for this thing. And sadly, maybe you won't have people that walk by his final resting spot and see that dash in the same light that they should see it. As a patriotic American that stood up, there are some people who will say, well, he's just a gun nut. This is the fight of our lifetime. This is what can lie before us. Because if you look at the history of dictatorial governments and individuals, one of the first things they always seek to do is to disarm the citizenry. And once the citizenry is disarmed, it's Katie bar the door. You don't believe it's happening right now? Go back, turn on your TVs, and look at what's happening in Venezuela, where President Maduro just is now trying to arm people that are loyal to him as his own militia. And what happens if President Maduro does that? And these little roving bands go out armed against people that are standing up there seeing what is happening with the consolidation of power in the government to keep them oppressed. The fact that Venezuela is one of the richest countries in the world, should be, but yet you have people eating out of garbage cans. It's no different than what happened with a guy by the name of Adolf Hitler when the German people were disarmed, but the brown shirts were armed, and they took to the streets. You know, George Santayana said back in the mid to late 1920s, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. History is very cyclical, and it's happening right here before our eyes. There was a reason why the Founding Fathers said that the Second Amendment is important. It's not the First Amendment, but it's there to support and back up all of those individual freedoms that you have in that First Amendment. But if we don't understand that, if we don't study it, if we don't realize some of these court decisions, some of these backdoor things that are happening, if we don't have the ability to come together and have these thoughts and perspectives, shared and exchanged, then the next thing you know, our children and grandchildren will not live in a land that was the land of the free because we had the home of the brave. I can't think of a better day for us to have this gathering than on the day that some brave American men stood on Lexington Green and fired the shot that was heard all around the world because they said, you cannot take our guns. No matter how great you think you are, we will not allow that to happen. Make that stand, because that is how you will be judged in your dash when people go to visit your final resting spot. Did you stand up for liberty? Did you stand up for freedom? Did you take your stand as part of the heritage of this great constitutional republic? Or did you cower away? I don't know how many people remember the bravery of that one young man, but that is the symbol of who we are as rugged individuals in these great United States of America. God bless you all. Thank you. What are your questions if you have any?